What is up, Facebook land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce my buddy, longtime friend, Kermit Cintron, I'm going to dedicate the show. For those of you who are living under a rock, Kermit Cintron is a former world champion boxer. At one point in time, the mid-2000s, was considered one of the best pound-for-pound boxers on the planet. And, boxing has been a passion of mine. I've been amateurly boxing for 30 years, and it's my favorite sport. And so I watch a lot of boxing, and I understand the training, the sacrifice, the impact it has on your personal life, on your brain, and the fact that it is a violent, potentially deadly sport. And over the last week and a half, there's been two boxers who were killed as a result of boxing. And they didn't die in the ring, but they died shortly thereafter their fights as a result of the beatings they took in those fights. So it's a reminder that while we watch pay-per-view and we have opinions on who's the best for this and the best that, the reality is these guys are risking their lives every day, chasing their dreams and doing a sport that they love, but ultimately they are risking their lives. So my dedication today is to those two boxers that lost their life, and every boxer who is willing to step in the ring and take on another human being and let them pound the piss out of their heads. So for that being said, that was my dedication. The podcast, where can you hear it? Pretty much anywhere. iTunes, CastBox, Anchor, you name it, you can find it. It's on like 12 different platforms. As I've been doing for the last few weeks, I'm plugging my 2006 book that I wrote about my brother, A Brother's Love and Memoir. I'm the little one right there. I'm not picking my nose either, I don't think. But that was the book I wrote in honor of my brother, Andy, who passed away in 1989, and just shares our life together and the struggles that he went through and the amazing life that he lived and how his death affected me. So if anybody wants to get that, they can get it on Amazon. They can get it on my website, mattcubbler.com. But I'd appreciate anybody that takes the time to read it. And if you want to leave a review on Amazon, that'd be great. All right, my man, Kerm. So how are you, man?
Man, I've been great. I can't complain.
So Kerm and I have known each other for about 10, 11 years. I was and we won't discuss the person, but at one point in time, I was managing and training a pro boxer, and Kermit and I met through that interaction and just sort of hit it off and have stayed friends ever since. And, I can honestly say there's not a lot of really good guys in boxing, and Kermit is one of the few guys that I respect as a human being, as a man, as a father, and a husband, as well as his career in boxing. So without further ado, former IBF Welterweight Champion of the world, Kermit Cintron.
What's going on, man? What's going on?
Listen, man, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy. You got a lot of things going on in your business life and selling life insurance and raising 3 kids and going to all their sporting events. But I do appreciate taking the time tonight.
Anytime, man. Anytime for you, man. You always took that time to help me out with certain things. Especially with when it comes to the conditioning, and if there was anything that I needed, you were always there for me. So I really appreciate that from you.
That's what friends do, bud. So you've seen the show. You know the format that I have. It's a very relaxed format. I don't really have a plan other than to ask one question. And that question is, who is Kermit Cintron?
Well, Kermit Cintron is, most of all, man, I'm just, I'm just glad to be here on your show. I'm just a regular man, husband, a father to kids. Boxing, it's what I chose as a career for the past 18 years. Blessed for the fact that I was able to do it with my health being online. I was healthy enough to go through the 18 years and becoming a 2-time world champion, WBO 147, and then again at the IBF at welterweight as well, which is a 147-pound limit. Right now I'm just just enjoying somewhat of the semi-retired part of my career, but there's always that itch there's always that age to come back, and I personally miss the competitive part of things. I miss the workouts. I don't want to say that I don't miss the spotlight. You'd be lying as an athlete if you say that you don't miss it. It's something that's always been part of my life. I'm just here to share my stories.
Well, I've had Mickey Ward on the show, and I've been around boxers, and I know the trials and tribulations that most boxers go through. 99% of all boxers make 1% of the money, and 1% of the boxers make 99% of the money, and it's a lot of work for a lot of boxers to receive minimal paychecks, but you gotta love the sport. It's one of the few sports that professional sports that you really have to have a passion for, because you don't get the opportunities like an NFL player that has a minimum of $1 million that they're going to make for a season to potentially not really play that much. You got to go in and risk your life every time you step into the ring, and train as if you're going to war. And it's one of the few sports out there that has such a disparity between who's getting what for each fight, and it's not always based on your talent or your ability. A lot of it's based on luck and marketability, and it's a shame that that's the way the sport is. But you were lucky enough to fight on the biggest stages. You fought on HBO numerous times, Showtime, ESPN, pay-per-view. You fought for world titles in multiple weight classes. Let's go back to the very beginning of when you decided to strap on the gloves. I know your backstory, but I don't think a lot of people know, that you're a Bucks County boy, and where you went to school, and that you were a wrestler. So let's talk about all that first.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as a high school wrestler, getting offers, 3 different offers for scholarships for wrestling. Ended up going to a junior college in Lancaster, Thaddeus Stevens, because of my ACTs being too low. My scores were too low, so I had to go to a junior college and get some credits. After my freshman year, I ended up going to junior college national level. I didn't think much there was anything else for me in wrestling. So I just decided to try boxing. I grew up around boxing. My uncle, who raised me, along with my grandma and my aunt, he was a professional fighter himself. And so I tried boxing. My roommate, who was here from Reading, he introduced me to a good friend of his, and that friend of his introduced me to Marshall. That's how I got to Reading, and really focused in boxing. I started loving boxing by my sophomore year in college. I decided to drop out and commit to the boxing. Whereas it was a risk that I took. But at the end of the day, I look back and it was actually a good risk. Of course, your family wasn't really supporting me in that aspect of what decision I made. But looking back now, they're all very happy for the fact that I took that risk. Life is all about taking a risk. I tell that to people, and if you don't take that risk, you will never know. It's just like you, Matt, being a state cop, you out there every day risking your life. So I think, taking the risk, I tell my kids, I tell the kids out there, and the city kids, I tell them all the time, listen, take that risk, because you will never know how far you can get with that. Which whatever it is that they want to do in life. I know a lot of people that don't take the risk, and at the end of the day, they're unhappy with what they settle for. So I always tell everybody, take that risk, and you never know what you're gonna get out of that situation that you want to get into. So from there, I didn't have that much of amateur background. I had 27 fights, won 24 out of the 27. Ended up going to the 2000 Olympic trials, the Eastern trials, which I made it to the semifinals. That year, the Olympian was Jermaine Taylor at 156 pounds. From there, I turned pro. I made some noise. I did make some noise in the Olympic trials. People didn't realize who I was until then. Then Main Event, who was interested, along with Lou Duva, who had Main Events as well. And I believe he had separated from that company, but he was interested as well, along with Don King. And I needed to prove myself. Nobody had signed me at that time yet. I needed to prove myself, so I ended up taking fights, $400 for 4 rounds, $500 for 6 rounds, whatever it was. And so I basically busted my butt off training every day except for Sundays. Sunday was my days off. I did that from 2000 to about 2001. So about a year just fighting. I got to the point where I was 9-0 with 8 knockouts. That's when Main Events came in, and started getting some more interest in me. My first fight, they put me on their card. It was on a Showbox, New Generation. I went in there. Basically, I froze. I froze on national TV for the first 4 rounds, I believe it was. And by the 5th round, Marshall and Joe, who were my trainers at the time, they were hard on me in the corner, slapping me, just telling me just to go out there and let my hands go. Surely I did. I let my hands go in that 5th round, and I ended up knocking him out. So then they were really, they really didn't like how I looked for the fact that I froze. Then they gave me another opportunity on another Showbox event, and that was in San Antonio, and I was matched with last name was Davila, and it was for the youth WC Youth World Title. So I went in there and I just took care of business. I jumped right on him, and by the 2nd round, he was I had stopped him, and that's when Main Events came in and gave me a nice signing bonus, a 4-year deal contract. Ever since that day, I fought on HBO many times, Showtimes many times, ESPN many times, Telefutura, NBC, like you name it, they had me on TV, and I was making a lot of noise. I just the key was to stay in focus. And Marshall, my trainer, along with Joe Pastor, they both kept me focused, keeping me away from hanging out with the wrong crowd, and that helped me stay focused. And if you want something that bad, you can stay focused for that many years. So from 2000 to 2000, by the time I was in 2004 came, I was already world champion. It's taken a lot of fighters 6, 7, sometimes 8 years just to get one title shot, and I did that in 4 years, and that's because, like I said, I stayed focused. I trained hard 3 times a day for 4 years straight since I turned pro, and that's what my schedule was. And Sundays was my day off, where I could just like hang out and be with my family. The key was to stay focused and training hard, and that's what I did, and it all paid off.
Well, let me ask you this: I'm just trying to figure out when the family component to your life came in, because that's for a lot of guys when they're young, you're just in college. Yeah, I remember being 18, 19 years old, and my mentality then was a whole lot different than it is when I started having kids. So when did you meet Maria? When did you begin having a family?
Yeah, absolutely. Right after, right about after the Teddy fight, which was for the WBO title. That's when I came back home and hung out, took some time off from after that fight, and and again I always hung out with my trainers, because at that time it was the right thing to do. Just hanging out with them was going to keep me out of trouble. And one day, Joe and I went to this drag racing here at Maple Grove here in Reading. And, through a friend of Joe, who was a professional drag racer, he had invited Joe along with Maria, who Maria and Joe knew each other. And I had no idea. And that's how we first met, through a friend of ours, mutual friend. And since that day, we always stay in touch. And the one thing that I liked about Maria was that, she was very supportive of the whole situation.
One thing when I first met Maria, whenever that was in 2010 or 11, whatever it was, the thing I noticed about her that I found the most appealing about her was that she truly understood the sport of boxing. She was unbelievably intelligent, and she was almost like the eyes on the back of your head. You know what I'm saying? Like, she always had your back. She always was the one that, I've been around a lot of boxers, and they don't have that. They have people that are trying to take from them constantly.
Absolutely.
Hangers on, people taking. And you had somebody that literally had your back and understood the sport. Wasn't just a boxing wife. She was entrenched in the sport, and she understood the players in the game and the dirtiness of boxing and the sliminess of the deals. And so she was all in on that. And I think that when it comes to the longevity of your career and the fact that you've maintained not only who you are as a person, but you maintained your level of professionalism throughout boxing because you had somebody like that in your corner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one thing that like I said, I liked about her. I knew from day one, her supporting me and pushing me and making sure that I was eating properly. She would call me, "Hey, how you feeling?" At that time we were just friends and just about, we started liking each other. But those times, like, she was just making sure that I was getting rest. I was, eating properly. She made sure that I was, feeling okay. Anything, if I needed anything, if Joe and Marshall wasn't around, she was there for me. And I thought that was pretty cool. Her, doing that for me. Like I said, we just started becoming friends and liking each other. So
when did you officially start dating?
Believe it or not, that first time I met Maria, believe it or not, it took me 6 months for me to take her out on a date. We kept running into each other. After that one day, we kept running into each other. Hey, when can we hang out? When are we gonna go out? And she was a busy girl. She was working busy. And it took me 6 months, and finally, right when I was about to give up on her, she had picked up the phone, answered her phone, and we spoke for probably about half hour on the phone. And that same day, we met for dinner, and it's all she wrote. It's all she wrote. From there on, we stayed connected, and we started dating.
I appreciate your guys' relationship. I really do, and that's not in a weird way. But I'm very, having been around, professional athletes in every sport for the last 25 years, from Tim Tebow's to Peyton Manning's and everyone in between that I've done security for. I've had the privilege and the sometimes not a privilege of seeing the behind the scenes stuff, and it's not always pretty, and it's not always what it seems to be from an outsider's point of view looking in. I can tell you that Tim Tebow by far is the most true to who he appears to be. He really is. He's actually even better in real life. And you're one of those kinds of guys where, you see boxers, and it's a violent sport, and it's not always a sport where the interactions with a boxer makes you feel like you can have a conversation with them. I think it's not always that kind of thing. But you were always one of those guys that I just thought was exactly like you portray yourself to be. And I think that's hard to do in professional sports. It's hard to maintain your authenticity into who you are because you have the spotlight on you. You have this image of, this violent, destructive human being, and to know you out of the ring and how you are with your daughters and your son and your wife and your devotion to them and your commitment to them it's really and one of the things that reason why I wanted you on the show is I think it's really cool to share that side of professional sports with people that may have not have any insight or access to that. And showing people like you that are not just, world-class athletes who have been on the biggest stage and won. You're also a guy that's, taking your daughter to swim practice and coaching your son's wrestling team. And, what I'm saying, those things are real. And you teach yoga and fitness classes up in the yoga studio that your wife owns. I mean, you have this real dad, husband type life that is still who you are.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing that no matter how much money I've made through boxing, and how many fans I've had and all that, and how good I was in boxing, to me, I've never forgotten, and I never will, where I came from. And I came from nothing. I came from a family that, as a Hispanic person, and I always, with any Hispanic, you will see it. They're always very close. They're very lovable. They're always supporting each other. And I never forget where I came from, man. And that's one thing that I will never change.
So let's go back to your boxing career. So you're now a world champion. You beat Teddy Reed for it's WBO, right?
WBO.
So you beat Teddy Reed. You've met your wife. You're still in the midst of your 4-year deal with Main Events. What year was your first fight against? Well, was Estrada before Margarito?
Margarito was before.
Okay. So when you're Margarito number one, for people who don't know that, Google Antonio Margarito, Google David Estrada, Google Teddy Reed, Google Canelo Alvarez. These are the people that Kermit faced in the ring. But Margarito has a very what's the best way to put this? He was a dirty son of a bitch. And unfortunately, when you were fighting him, he was dirty, but it had not yet come out, the level of his ability to cheat. So let's talk about that first Margarito fight.
First Margarito fight. My training camp was perfect. I couldn't ask for anything better than that. I thought the Teddy Reed fight Teddy Reed camp was perfect. Margarito fight camp was perfect. And I felt great going into the fight. But I knew something was different as soon as I stepped in that ring and he landed the first shot. Just his punches. It's not that he was an accurate puncher. Not that he was a big puncher. I faced, big punchers. At that time, Teddy Reed was the biggest puncher I've faced. And for him to do damage the way he did against me, and my face being all cut up and bruised, and my eyes being basically shut. But the next day, my one eye was shut completely, and my other eye was barely opened. And getting cut, I felt like when I got cut in the first round, I think it was in the second round, just that experience of being cut, I felt like my eye, when it split, I felt like my eyeball was coming out, and I lost the focus. I lost the focus and forgot that I was in a world title fight.
When people don't understand that you're boxing with 10-ounce gloves, or are they 8-ounce? What were you at the 8-ounce gloves? 147. Physics say that to do the type of damage that was done during that fight to you, it was almost impossible for someone who'd never done that much damage before to be able to have that kind of power and destructive ability with 8-ounce gloves weighing 147 pounds. And I would argue that fight ultimately was one of the reasons why you were able to bleed so much when your eyes would get cut a lot in fights. And it was because of Margarito's, obviously we can't prove it because there's no way to go back in time and check. But for people that don't know the story, Antonio Margarito was found to have used plaster inside of his gloves. When they would do his wraps, they would wet his wraps and they would become hard like plaster. And and that is like punching somebody with a cast underneath a glove. And if you can only imagine how that must feel, Kermit can tell you it doesn't feel good. Ultimately, you lost that fight. What was the next fight after that?
The fight after that was it was a local fight. Just needed to regroup myself, and that was a fight against Francisco Para from Mexico, who actually had the exact same style as Margarito, and actually could punch harder than Margarito. But you know, being fair, fighting fair is a totally different fight. You know, I ended up stopping him in the second round. You know, I was just because I was that hungry to get back in the ring.
Now, at this point in time, did you think there was just something weird about Margarito's punches? Like, was there in the back of your mind going, "That's just not normal"? That the way that felt.
Oh no, absolutely. I said it in one of the interviews. Like, man, I've never been. I mean, I fought, and you know, and I've fought bigger punches, and I didn't feel their punches feeling the same way I felt Margarito's punches. So, you know, I knew something was up. And like you said, you know, it was nothing that at the time we could prove.
So what was the time between Margarito 1 and Margarito 2?
After the para fight, I ended up, you know, splitting with Marshall and Joe. I ended up going with Emmanuel Stewart, who, you know, who's a legend, who if you don't know him, look him up. A great, I mean, he's had many world champions. He's made many world champions as well. And one of the things that Marshall used to say to me was, you know, if I would ever need another trainer to train you, it would be Emmanuel Stewart. So thanks to at that time he was my attorney, his name is Josh. He knew Manny very well, so that's how I connected with Emmanuel Stewart. So with Emmanuel Stewart, I was with him from 2005 through 2007 or 2008, something like that. And in 2006, with him, I became the second time winning a world title, and that was for the IBF.
And so who was that against?
And that was against his last name is Suarez, Mark Suarez. That was against Mark Suarez, who at that time was actually one of the most dangerous fighters too. Who, I mean, he was knocking everybody out. He had knocked out the number 3 at that time, number 3 guy in the world, knocked him out in the first round. And you know, and he was number 1. Then they had pushed me at number 2 after that third guy ended up losing. So I was number 2, fighting for the vacant title that
Mayweather
had vacant. So that's how we got to fight and for the title. And you know, he in the first round he was dirty. He tried to do one of them Margarito come forward, you know, start punching. He ended up hitting me behind the head. First punch, he landed behind the head. I was actually dazed. I went down and, you know, just kept my composure this time around. And, you know, I stood up. The ref knew that it was a back of the head shot, so he didn't, you know, he wasn't counting. So he made sure that was okay. Went back in the fight, and I just started out boxing him, you know, making him miss and making him pay, you know, and that's what Emmanuel Stewart wanted. So by this 5th round, he was done. He already knocked out, and that's how I won the second title.
So after you win that title, what year was the Margarito 2?
The Margarito 2 was 2006, I think it was.
So right after that,
right. I mean, I stayed busy. I know I had fought for my first title defense. I fought Matisse, Lucas Matisse, and he was another guy that he was strong, big puncher. I think at that time he was 28-1 with, I think he had 25 knockouts. So you had two big punchers, going at it. I was just smart enough to stick with what Manny Stewart wanted me to do, and that was working behind my jab at all times. And by the second round, I had knocked him out. Then after that fight, I ended up fighting what's his name? Jesse Feliciano. And that fight was in at the Staples Center. I mean, and I loved the Staples Center. I mean, like, that place was packed. And fighting in front of 15,000 people was probably the best experience I've ever had in boxing. I ended up breaking my hand right the very first 30 seconds of the first round. Broke my right hand with a headshot, and fought like that till the 10th round. I just caught him with a nasty left hook that the ref ended up stopping it. Then after that fight was the Margarito fight. My third defense was for the Margarito fight.
Now, had your hand fully healed by then?
My hand was then. I mean, it felt great. My hand was fine. I had no problem with my hand. Which is one of the things. As a fighter, you want to compete, and knowing that your hand is still injured, in my mind, it was great, and I felt like it was great. But that's the fight where really answered some of my questions, because from the get-go, again, a fighter that's not that big of a puncher, basically he pushes his puncher.
Right.
I don't think he never had the snap of a punch. He was more pushing his punches, and yeah, we were back and forth until he caught me with a big body shot, and that's what dropped me. But from the get-go, my eyes were cut, shut, marked. My face was all marked up. My lips were all busted. And when I went to the locker room, I said to Manny Stewart, Manny, I said, there's something going on, because no other fighter can mark me as much as Margarito can in the first round. Then I told my attorney at the time, I said to him, and it's out there in an interview. I had said that that there's something going on in his gloves, because I felt a lot of knuckle going through his gloves than any other fighter I've ever faced. And I know he had fought Margarito. Margarito had fought Cotto right after me to unify the titles. Same thing with Cotto. Cotto was, beating him in every round, but if you look at the fight, Cotto beating him in every round, but really Margarito's the one that was, marking him in all kinds of ways. Busted lips, busted mouth, eyes were all, cut up. And so then, I think Cotto ended up getting stopped in the 11th round on that fight. And I think after that fight with Cotto, I think it's when Shane Mosley fought Margarito, and that's where he got caught with that.
Talk about a great fighter, Sugar Shane Mosley, man. I loved watching his. He was. He had the greatest mix of flair, of showmanship, of boxing skills. He was just an all-time great.
Power. He could punch.
So when you finally after the Sugar Shane Mosley Margarito fight, and you finally found out he had plaster in his gloves, what was your thoughts?
All I could say was I knew it. I knew something was up with him. I knew something was up. If fighters have this, this grace coming out from the dressing room to the walk-in music and all that stuff, walkout music and all that stuff. But he always had that grinch in his face. Like, he knew something that we didn't know, and he knew that he was cheating. And you can see it in his face. And when he got caught, he got caught right there in the locker room. He got caught right when he was getting his hands wrapped. He, whatever plaster chip things fell off his hand wraps. That's when Nazim Richardson, who's one of the greatest trainers out there from Philadelphia, ended up catching that. And going into the fight, you could see the difference in Margarito's face. You could tell that whatever he had in his glove, he didn't have no more. So he had to go in there and fight with his heart, and whatever skill that he had. And Shane Mosley ended up beating the crap out of him, stomping him. And
he didn't get marked up, did he?
No. And I believe that I think he went for 0-6 after that. He wasn't winning any fights.
And have you ever had I know you probably haven't, but did you ever have a conversation with Margarito afterwards?
No, I never did. I know
you've called him out a couple times, but
I wanted a third fight. I wanted a third fight because I wanted to fight him clean.
Mm-hmm.
But the fight just never happened. I know Marshall 2 years ago, he was trying to get that fight for me, and the promoter just couldn't get it together.
So then, after you're done Margaritos and you know that what happened to you with him wasn't an act of your inability to fight or your inability to take a punch. It was the fact that he was cheating. Did your mentality change a little bit? That like the validation that I am still the great boxer that I always knew I was, and I wasn't that I had this one kryptonite boxer that would just take me down. Did it change anything in you?
I was already kind of somewhat. I was sick to my stomach, after all that, him getting caught on that stuff, and I knew something was up. I, as an athlete, you try to keep your head straight. I know a lot of athletes don't come back from situations like that. For me, it was half. It was like, somewhat mentally damaged and somewhat mentally still focused. And I continued my career. I continued my career after that loss. I think I went 6 in a row after that before I got another world title shot.
Well, one of the famous fights, because it's a stupid rule, was the Paul Williams fight. Let's talk about that fight, because I don't care what anybody says. You were up 3-1 going into the fourth after 4. But let's talk about that fight. Paul Williams, God rest his soul, is no longer with us. But let's talk about that fight. And at the time, Paul Williams was one of the up and coming. Was he at 154 then, or was he still at 147?
Yeah, he was at 147.
He was one of the top guys coming up. And I know that the guy I was managing, we had an opportunity to fight him, and it never came about. And I think it was right after you fought him. I think the opportunity came about. But let's talk about that fight.
Well, at that time, I was training in Houston with Ryan Shields, who, today he's a good trainer as well, who trained Mike and Holyfield, I believe. And
wasn't he Lennox Lewis too?
No, he didn't train Lennox Lewis. No, Lennox Lewis didn't train him. He didn't train Lennox Lewis. I don't think so anyways. But he did train Mike Tyson for a little bit, and then he did train Holyfield for a little bit as well. That fight, it was a fight that, it was a perfect fight for both of us at the time in our situations. We were just looking for big fights, and that fight should have happened at welterweight when I was a world champion. He was a world champion. We were supposed to be unified, and I just got a better deal fighting a second Margarito than I did, against Paul Williams, and just for the fact that if I would have beat Margarito, I would have gotten Miguel Cotto right after that, and just fortunately it didn't go my way, but that was the fight that I skipped for to fight Margarito. But at 154, I went in there ready to go. I was ready to go. I was sharp in training camp. my sparring partners did a heck of a job getting me ready. I had two of the 6'2" southpaw fighters, and they're hard to find. And they were out there, and I was able to work with them, and they helped me out, and I was in the best shape possibly all my career, and I felt that every round that I won, I boxed him, I landed him. At one time, I ended up hurting him, and I think that was in the third round, I believe. And it sucked because that's when things started getting warmed up for both of us. We started letting our hands go, and I was just a little faster than him, and caught him before he caught me, and he was hurt. You could tell his legs were gone, and when he fell, he actually bended down a little bit. So, as a fighter, learning from other older fighters, putting pressure behind the head when he's bent down like that way, and let him fight his way up, and you put pressure, was going to tire him out more. So that's what I did. I was putting pressure, and when he fell, and my momentum just took me out. I lost my momentum. My balance, and out the next thing you know, I'm out the ring.
Like fully out for people to visualize it. If you want to Google the fight,
I was like Superman flying out.
So Google the fight. It's first of all, you'll see that he was dominating. Kermit was dominating the fight, but he goes out of the ring through the ropes, lands on the scores table, hit your head. Correct?
I hit my back, my side of my back hit the corner of a monitor that knocked the wind out of me. And
so now you're laying on the floor on outside the ring.
Correct.
And let's talk about that.
So here comes a few of the commissioner workers, the inspectors, and then here comes the doctor. So the doctor is asking me. I'm trying to catch my breath. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just fell out of the ring. I believe I have 5 minutes to recover. So he's asking me if I'm ready to go and continue. Well, I'm shaking my head because I can't speak. I'm trying to catch my breath. Then he asked me again. I shook my head saying no. And then the third time when I started catching my breath, I was just about to ready to go. He pinched me down with his knee so that I didn't stand up. He said he then right there and then he called the fight off, saying that, oh no, this guy you might have a punctured lung. That's what he called it. And honestly, it was the Al Haymon show. Everybody was seeing that I was about to knock Paul Williams out, being the fact that he was the one that's supposed to be win the fight. And I believe that the doctor was Al Haymon's employee. And right when they called the fight, I knew right then that they were going to rob me. At the time, my manager Josh and my trainer Ronnie, I right there and said, they taking this fight from me. They're going to take this fight from me. It was not fair that they didn't give me time to recover, at least catch my breath, so I can speak up. And he ended up calling the fight off. The doctor did.
So that was in California, correct?
California. So
California rules were anything like that within the first 4 rounds, they go to the cards. And
apparently after 4 rounds, but then I guess at the table they changed the rule. After 3 rounds, then they go to the scorecard. That's how.
So, and it was a 10-second rule, right? That no one knew about. That they said it was a 10-second. If you're outside the ring, you have 10 seconds. Correct?
That's right. I mean, I don't know if that was the rule. Now, I cleared my mind. I thought, I fell out of the ring that I would have some time to recover and get back up.
I just think, and I think you were robbed blind. A, B, I think I don't necessarily have a problem with going to the cards because you were winning on the cards. You should have been declared the winner.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the thing that I had the most issue with is that you didn't have the ability to get back into the ring. And I don't care who you are. You fall out of a 6-foot high ring.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take you more than 10 seconds to collect your thoughts and get yourself at least in a position where you can get back into the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that is a horrendous rule. And I think that it was one of those fights that it's an embarrassment. It was a black eye on boxing.
I agree. It just it kind of stinks because the moment you started that fight just started to heat up, and again we were both throwing and landing punches, and it just unfortunately Al Heyman was I personally think it was all Al Heyman. And and it sucks because I even asked for the rematch and they didn't want to give me a rematch.
Well, it's obvious you were dominating that fight. So then let's move on from that. You fought Angulo, who was, and I think he was a legit puncher.
Mm-hmm.
His power, he was much like Margarito in his style, the Mexican fighter style.
Mm-hmm.
Straight on, not much of a lot of movement. He was pretty much in your face, in your pocket the whole time. But you kept him at distance with your jab. That was another one of those fights where you really worked behind your jab well.
Mm-hmm.
And, you put a whooping on him. Not many people had. That was it. I think you were the first. He was his first loss, right?
Yeah, he was. I believe he was like 19-0 or 20-0, some of that with like 17 knockouts. He was a big puncher. And again, same style as Margarito, and he was actually a bigger puncher than Margarito. And here, I mean, like, I barely was mucked up. I kept doing I kept my plan, and my plan was to keep him on the outside and work my jab, just like Manny Stewart had me working against when I fought Matisse. Just like stick to your jab, use your jab, everything's behind your jab, and that's what I did in that fight.
You win that fight, and you get another shot a couple fights later at a world title against Canelo, correct?
That is correct. But before that, this Canelo Angulo fight, it was supposed to be a 10-round fight. Well, here, his promoter, why can't I think of his name now? I can't think of his name now. But he ended up changing it. Whereas, we're gonna go and do let's make this fight instead. I'm talking about this happened in the locker room, dressing room. Let's make this fight a 12-round fight for the elimination. Well, right. not a problem. I was already in great shape. I was ready to go 12 rounds. But that just show you that that other promoter thought that Cintron was only training for a 10-round fight. So they thought that mentally they were going to get me. And I just kept my composure and went in there and just stuck to my plan. But after that fight I was promised a big fight. I was promised another world title fight, and it was going to be for a few million dollars. Let's just put it that way, just a few. And the fight never happened. So I ended up fighting in Puerto Rico against Julian something, Julian Ramos, something like that. And that was, a 10-round fight. And that was just stay busy fight. But that's the only time that I was able to fight. And, and thanks to Lou DiBella, because he was the one that got me that fight in Puerto Rico. That was my only fight in Puerto Rico. Always wanted to fight in Puerto Rico, and he made it happen for me. But after that fight, I ended up fighting Sergio Martinez.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that Sergio fight. Yeah.
That was my title. That was my second. That was for the 154 WBC title fight.
And that was a split decision, right? Or was that a draw?
It was a draw. That was a draw. It was actually a weird fight. The fight was back and forth. I knew it was back and forth. At one time, he ended up catching me with a nice punch that I walked right into. At that time, I thought it was a headbutt. But when I rewatched the fight, I said, "Wow, he really did call me with a big shot." And I was running right into that shot. So props to him. Did he hurt me? I was not hurt. I knew where I was. What happened was when I took that shot, my ear just sucked air, and from there I start backing up a little bit because I start feeling pressure in my head. Then my ear started releasing the air, so it was like it was a really loud whistle that you use for like a dog, that high note whistle. That's what it was, and that's when I took a knee, because I thought let me take a knee and go from there. And that was the only time that that I went down in that fight. Other than that, I know I had heard him once or twice in the fight. It was a back and forth fight, and I felt like I won that fight. I ended up a draw.
Yeah, that was a weird fight. I've watched that a few times, and that was just a very weird fight. And I hate. There's nothing worse than a draw, because that's just somebody just throwing up their hands because they don't want to make a decision. And I think that judging is as subjective as it is to begin with, and to call it a draw was just kind of like a pussy way out. I hate draws. Now let's talk about we got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I want to make sure we talk about the Canelo fight, and then I want to talk about your book that just came out. So let's talk about the Canelo fight. That was world stage, man. That was a big fight. Canelo was.
Yeah, it was a big fight, and it was at his hometown in Mexico City. And this bull ring. I mean, just like thousands of people, and it's a fight that I was pressured into by my manager. He was just like, "Hey, you're not gonna get another big fight like this ever again." Blah blah blah. And I was like, "All right, I'll take the fight." Well, she was already gone and to LA, California, for a 10-week camp to get her degree. So thankfully my brother and my in-laws were able to help me with the kids and get them wherever they need to be. So in 3 days I left to Houston, and it was 3-week camp. That's all it was, a 3-week camp. I went to Mexico. I went there. I was treated okay. I mean, just like anywhere else. I mean, I'm the underdog, and I had the experience to go in there with one of the best in the world today.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd have to live on a rock or on the planet Pluto to not know the name Canelo Alvarez. He's fought everybody, and he is the highest paid boxer right now since Mayweather is retired. He's got that deal with Dazn or whatever the hell, DAZN. Yeah. So I mean, he was amazing then, but he's an even bigger name now.
Absolutely.
And I think it's amazing the names and the big fights that you fought in your career, and the fact you did it in 2 different weight classes. I know that there's no such thing as, at least not yet, as retired. So if you do happen to make a comeback, that I will be in your corner supporting you. And whatever it is you do, I always get behind, just because I believe in you. But let's talk about your book. I know that and I didn't even know you were writing a book until I saw your post on Facebook. So what's that about?
So basically, it's just the book and the stories about my career. From day one to the last fight I had, and it just talks a little bit about my life outside of boxing as well. Just to give you a little, just a brief thing outside boxing. Bravura was just a little bit of what went on in my career in boxing.
How did that come together? Who was I'm going to guess Maria had something to do with that.
No, actually, man, I'm sorry, I don't have my notes in front of me, but this guy reached out to me. He's out of Ohio. He's a reporter, small time reporter, but he's done a lot of reports, and he reached out to me. He wanted to do something on me, and I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, we spent probably a whole year. I mean, he's driven from Ohio Akron, Ohio, to my house, and we sat down. We've shared, pictures. I mean, I shared stories with him and all that stuff, and he did a good job on that story.
What's the name of the book?
Just Kermit Cintron. Just look it up, Kermit Cintron, and it's all there. It's
Well, I'll make sure I put the link to the book in the notes on Facebook. I think the last part of this episode is I want to talk about your kids and what they mean to you.
Man, my kids mean the world to me. I love kids, always wanted kids, and my parents, they both passed away by the time I was 12 years old. My mom died when I was 8. My dad died when I was 12 years old. And, ever since then, I said to myself that I will always be there for my kids no matter what. I don't care, how much I had to work, but I'll make sure that I was going to be there for my kids. And, thanks to through boxing, I was basically able to stay home 24/7 with them and spend the time with them. Except for the times that I was out training and stuff like that. But they did come to every camp of mine, and they came visit me and spend time together and stuff like that. But now it's nothing but enjoying myself, sitting back and watching them compete in whatever sports they're playing. My oldest Savannah, she's swimming. I've taken her to North Carolina, to Florida, to California. She swam at Buckner University just recently. Now I'm driving her tomorrow to Ohio for her to compete. She's serious about it. So I put my time in helping her with it. Same with Denali, my middle child. She's playing volleyball and she's great at it. She loves it. She's serious about it. So I do the same thing for her. Whatever money I need to spend to help her out. I didn't have that growing up as an athlete, so I'm doing that for my kids, and of course my boy Clemente. He's 11 years old and very athletic. Any sport you put him in, he'll learn it real quick, and by the end of the season he's amazing. And his sport right now is baseball. I mean, basically he's amazing. He's just a great pitcher. Just recently, I want to say 2 months ago, he was clocked pitching, and he hit 64. And,
at 11 years old.
And he 11 years old. And so, no, actually, he was technically 10, just turning 11. And it's just amazing that, what kids can do now with the proper training. Matt, all about that. You're an expert at that. And so giving my kids the proper training for their sports, it's just making them a lot better than just going through how we went through as kids, just going outside playing and okay, we worked out with the coaches and stuff like that, but that was the extent of it. We never had the stuff that you teach now to these athletes today.
Well, I will. I'm going to close the show out here in 1 second, but I want to mention your daughter Savannah. She's. I did send the information to the one swimmer I know at Florida Gulf Coast, who was very impressed with her times. So she's going to let her coach know. Your daughter Savannah is a very talented swimmer, and being the father of a talented swimmer, I can tell you the amount of time and energy and effort and commitment and patience it takes to become great. And I always admire parents of kids who are swim dads and swim moms who are active in their kids' development. And I think that it's obvious the work that you put into her and the coaches that she has and all the competition she's been to and the level of competition she's been to is just going to continue to help her reach her goals. So I'm always there to support in that as well. Hang tight. I'm not sure if we'll disconnect when this is done, but it's a new version of the BeLive.tv. If so, I'll give you a call on the cell. Everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Thank you again to my buddy, Kermit Cintron, former WBO. Outstanding, but it was my pleasure to have you on, and I'm thankful for it. He's a former WBO, IBF World Champion, fought who's who in the zoo of boxing in the 2000s. And he is a great family man, father, husband, friend. And I wish him all the best in whatever he decides to do. And if you get a chance, go out and get his book, self-titled Kermit Cintron. Everybody, thank you very much. God bless. And for God's sakes, be kind to one another.